Bey is back, and Reinoso's got him. All right, I was up in New York, and when I left, I had a producer who looked like he was a prisoner in a Russian gulag with a long white beard. Now I have someone that looks like a French poet and is about 20 years younger. Look at him.
Hello,
Hey.
mon frère. How are
Yeah.
you today? We're having a good podcast today.
Did you miss me?
No, I saw you a couple of days ago.
Right. All right, thanks. You look great.
Thank you,
Actually,
so do you.
this is a much better look for you.
So says my wife.
All right, thanks. Well, I was in New York, and when I came back, I had an experience that smacked me in the face, letting me know that I was back in Florida. So I went to the mailbox to catch up on all the mail that had come in while I was away, and there was this very nice-looking young woman there, about 30s, early 30s, walking her dog. And I was wearing a Yale sweatshirt. So she said to me, "Oh, did you go to Yale?" And I said, "Yeah, I went to the graduate school for drama." And she said, "Oh, my father was a basketball coach, and he used to have a Yale cap that he wore all the time. And he was so funny. People would say to him, 'Did you go to Yale?' And he said, 'Yale? I thought it said jail.'" Hilarity ensued. Anyway, we started talking. She said, You sound like an interesting person." She goes, "What did what kind of work do you do?" So I started to tell her, and I told her I'd been a radio talk show host, and I had shared a studio with Sean Hannity. And she said, "Oh, I love that skinny blonde woman." And I said, "Ann Coulter?" She goes, "Yes, she outed the Obamas for sure." And I said, "What do you mean she outed the Obamas?" "Well, she proved that Michelle Obama was a transsexual." And I went, "What are you talking about?" I said, "They have 2 kids." I said, "I read her book. It talks about her life growing up as a young girl, going to college, losing her best friend who died while she was in." I said, "She's not a transsexual." I said, "You probably believe that Trump won the election by millions of votes." And she said, "Of course he did." Now, at moments like those, and probably some of you have had similar experiences, you have to really think, is it worth discussing this with the person? Is it worth debating them? Albert, what do you think? No, I'm sure, right?
I would think she'd become your new best friend.
I think I should have her on this show.
I mean, you just have to smile at somebody like that and say, "Have a good day."
Well, that's pretty much what I did in the end, because there's no convincing these people. Now, I hear this question over and over again on Facebook from friends, from discussion groups. Why is the country so divided? And this country is as divided as it was at any time since the Civil War. Well, that's, I think, is the wrong question. The question is, why is so much of this country delusional? That's the question. Now, the New York Times had a big magazine article on how this country changed after the COVID epidemic. And there was one section of it that was very interesting to me, because I think there were 2 times in my life where I thought this country has gone mad. And one of them has been as we went through COVID, and you had all of these people taking ivermectin and what was it, hydrochloroquine, and saying that Fauci was killing people. In fact, Ron DeSantis recently, they asked him, "What would you do differently from Trump if you were elected?" And the only thing he could mention was, "Well, I would have fired Fauci." And the second time I thought this country went mad was in the lead up to the Iraq War, when we were hit with so many irresponsible, frightening, unfactual things to make us afraid of what Saddam Hussein would do to us. Now, I'm going to talk about both those things, but in the New York Times article, they referred to a man who some people recognize as the father of sociology. His name was Emile Durkheim. He was French, and he posited that whenever there's a dramatic swing within society, regardless of direction, it leaves people unmoored, plugging them into a condition of what he called anomie, which might mean alienation. Or what happens is people lose all the rungs for their reality. So they're like adrift. And according to his studies, this can happen whether a society goes into depression, whether a society goes into financial success for everybody. But when it changes, people become unmoored from reality. And the lead up to the Iraq War, I believe, was related to the attack on 9/11, even though there was no relationship between Saddam and Osama bin Laden and what happened at the Twin Towers. But for the first time, we started to think of ourselves as vulnerable, as in danger. And you remember the phrase going around repeated over and over again on all of television and in the press was, "It's a new country after 9/11." And that was used in some ways to justify the war in Iraq. And this experience of going through the COVID epidemic with over 1 million people dying and new health regulations taking place, and people not know, as we learned more about, how to treat COVID, how to prevent COVID, people became unmoored. And I think that's a better question as to why we are delusional. Now, this delusion extends, through so many areas right now. We have CRT and drag queens and this war on woke, which many people find it difficult to actually define. Christopher Rufo, who started this whole CRT thing, he said, "I'm going to brand this in a way that CRT will be anything that we don't like. It's meaningless, but it's branded as this other thing." And that's what happened with woke. Now, woke, according to the Oxford Dictionary, it originally meant that you were well informed, that you were up to date. And more recently, they have added this. It means you're alert to racial or social discrimination and injustice. Now, that's the Oxford English Dictionary defining woke. But when you ask people to define woke, they have a very difficult time. The first time woke ever occurred in print was in the New York Times, 1962. And it was in reference to an article that was titled, "If You're Woke, You Dig It." And it had to do with beatniks picking up black slang. Yeah, woke was originally an African-American slang term that beatniks took up. And the first time it was in print was in 1962 in an article about that. But defining woke, it might not be that easy for so many people. Take a look at this. This woman wrote a book all about how woke was destroying our educational system and about how woke was indoctrinating our children. And then she was asked to define it. Take a look.
Consider themselves very liberal, and probably fewer of them consider themselves to be woke. And so, when we talk about traditional,
what does that mean to you? Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, I mean, woke is sort of the idea that this is going to be one of those moments that goes viral. I mean, woke is something that's very hard to define, and we've spent an entire chapter defining it. it is sort of the understanding that we need to totally reimagine and redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression. It's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
Yeah, look, your time.
Well, maybe in a longer soundbite, you could explain why the picture, or why the statue, Michelangelo's David, is woke. What happened in a Florida school? Elementary school children in the 6th grade were shown a video, not a video. They were shown a picture of Michelangelo's David. Now, Michelangelo's David, as you all know, is naked, as many of these Renaissance statues are. And the principal of the school was told that she could either resign or she would be fired, because 2 or 3 parents complained that their little darlings saw a little weenie on a statue. Now, in the city of Florence, where the statue exists, can we take a look at that picture? They have been invited to come see the statue in person. All the elementaries. I don't think they're paying their airfare to come over, but they just think this is so silly. Now, in Florida, though, we are going to adopt a new statue of David in our Capitol Rotunda. Here's a picture of our David. There you go. Because in Florida, we're worried about protecting children from looking at the genitalia, of one of the greatest artworks in the world. But they just passed a law that will allow 18-year-olds to buy AR-15s again. And they passed another law that will allow people to have a concealed carry without having to go through a license, without having to have any kind of training. So, I mean, I tell you, I live in South Florida now. Every day I pick up the newspaper and there's somebody getting shot, road rage. There's a guy playing with a gun with his girlfriend in a fancy hotel and it goes off and it kills her. There's a guy in a bar and he tries to buy a drink for the girlfriend of another guy. So he takes out a gun and he kills this guy. I mean, can you imagine if everybody's walking around strapped? I mean, it's bad enough as it is. But considering David, I think you got to keep these kids away from another masterpiece, Botticelli's Venus. There you go. You're familiar with it. She's being born out of a clamshell. But wait a second. Let me get out my magnifying glass. Can I see a nipple on that titty? Oh my God. What will happen if children see one of the greatest artworks in the history of mankind? Oh my God, they'll be scarred for life. It's terrible. All right, another word that has a different meaning these days is liberty. One mother from a right-wing group, Julie Marshall, she can get James Patterson's young adult series removed from school libraries so other kids can't read it because what? It's a young adult novel and she wants it out of the school. But why? Could it possibly be that James Patterson is friends with Bill Clinton and co-wrote a book with him? Now, this woman, Marshall, let me read what it says. Marshall, who filed most of the challenges to the Martin County School District's book titles, indicated on her form that she has not read or viewed this series of books. It's called Maximum Right. Let me say that again. The woman complaining about this young adult series hasn't even read the books or reviewed them. Let me tell you what it is about. It's about a bunch of kids who are mutants, who have wings, and they're flying around trying to discover how they were created. Oh, that's just terrible. So James Patterson said, hey, if kids in 6th grade or 12-year-olds can't read this book, then they shouldn't be allowed to see any Marvel movie. Oh my God, I remember the first time I read X-Men and they had a character with wings. It was so traumatic for me. I've never gotten over it. Can we take a look at that next picture? James Patterson has asked for people who enjoy his books. He's one of the most successful writers in the country, but he's in good company. That he wants them to write DeSantis after this absurd removal. But he's in good company. Jodi Picoult, who's also one of the most popular authors in the entire country. She had her book taken out as well. Do you remember The Music Man and Hermione Gingold? And she led a group of women who were singing, pick a little, talk a little, pick a little, talk a little, cheap, 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 pick a lot, pick a little more. And she complains, he left River City, the library building, but he left all the books to her. And Marion the librarian, of course, who is the love interest of the Music Man, Harold Hill, she comes down and sings in his face, Chaucer, Rabelais. Oh, and who's the third one? Hold on. Oh, how can I forget this? And then she goes, elongating the vulgar part. Chaucer, Rabelais, Balzac. In her inimitable accent, Hermione Gingold. And these biddies want these books taken out of the library in River City, in Iowa. Well, there's an old woman who's not like Hermione Gingold. She's 100 years old, and she is a resident of the county where they took all these books out. She's also a war widow. Her husband died in World War II at the age of 26. And she put together a quilt that depicts all the books that have been banned in the school and public libraries. And she went to speak before the county education board in this very moving speech. She's 100 years old. Take a look at this.
To protest our school's district book banning policy. One of the freedoms that the Nazis crushed was the freedom to read the books they banned. They stopped the free press, banned and burned books. The freedom to read, which is protected by the First Amendment, is our essential right and duty of our democracy. Even so, it is continually under attack. Banned books and burning books are the same. Both are done for the same reason. Fear of knowledge. Fear is not freedom. Fear is not liberty. Fear is control. My husband died as a father of freedom. I am a mother of liberty. Banned books need to be proudly displayed and protected from school boards like this.
All right. Of course, she was referring to this right-wing Mothers of Liberty group that talks about freedom and talks about liberty. But they want to speak for every other mother. If they don't like James Patterson's book, well, then no kid is going to read it. If they don't like the story of Ruby Bridges, then no kid's going to read it. If they don't like, I don't know, a book about civil rights or about Roberto Clemente, well, that's back on the shelves. But it was off the shelves for months, far longer than the New York Post article was off of Twitter about Hunter Biden. For months, they took it off. Why? Because he experienced racism. And DeSantis, remember the argument always was, well, this Don't Say Gay bill, it only refers to children in the first, second, and third grades. These kids are too little to hear about the fact that there are gay mommies and gay daddies in the world. Well, guess what? Now they're expanding it all the way up to 12. That bill will now go up to the 12th grade. It will encompass the entire Florida public school system. And that's another thing. I mean, you give these people an inch and they take a frickin' mile. We now have an abortion ban in Florida. That's a 2-week abortion ban. Oh, wait, you heard it was 6 weeks? Do you think any woman really knows she's pregnant until she misses her period? And that's after a month. It's after 4 weeks. So she has 2 weeks to decide, to get everything, to get through all the roadblocks that they've put up. Remember when he was running for governor, I mean, the thing that was said was, 15 weeks. That's a fairly liberal abortion window. It's similar to ones they have in the EU, in Europe. But once he got reelected, Katie, bar the door. All of a sudden, we're reversing the law now, so 18-year-olds can get AR-15s. We're taking over the educational system and negating the civil rights struggle from history and the reality that gay men and women exist in our country. The good news is that DeSantis seems to be plummeting in the polls versus Trump. And I've had this argument with friends as well. Which one is more dangerous? I think DeSantis is more dangerous than Trump. I look forward to Trump running again. And yes, I could have spent this whole podcast just talking about his rally in Waco, Texas. Oh, wait, Waco, Texas, which began with Ted Nugent rousing the crowd by calling President Zelensky a homosexual weirdo. And it just went down from there. I mean, you've seen it on the news. I don't have to go over it. But Trump is crazier than ever. I mean, at least in his first term or in his first campaign, he got to the point where he could admit that Barack Obama was made in the USA. In fact, I have a mug here with his birth certificate on it as I drink my coffee. But, even Trump, after a while, had to admit that he was wrong. Has he ever admitted he was wrong about anything else? But he did admit that. But that last shred of sanity is gone. So I told you, the last time I thought this country went mad, that it was delusional, was in the lead up to the Iraq War. Now, Garry Kasparov, who is the Russian freedom activist, has said the point of disinformation isn't to manipulate the truth. It's to exhaust your critical thinking. And in the lead up to the Iraq War, as George Bush's chief of staff, Andrew Card, said, we don't sell new products in August. We'll start in September. The Bush administration came up with so many things that were unsubstantiated, just not factual. The first thing was George Bush was at Camp David with Tony Blair, and he stepped out to confront the press, and he said this: the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, just came out with a new report that says Saddam is 6 months away from an atom bomb. What more evidence do you need? Not one reporter asked him, where is this report? we haven't heard about it. And the IAEA came out a few days later and said, there is no report. And then Dick Cheney on Meet the Press said it's pretty well confirmed Mohammed Atta was in Prague. When the CIA and the FBI had him in Virginia Beach at the time he was supposed to be meeting with Iraqi intelligence in Prague. And there was more, the aluminum tubes. There were a couple of places you could go and find the information that rebutted everything. Those people who say everybody thought he had WMD. I didn't think so, but you can't prove a negative. I always said I can't prove that he doesn't have WMD, but I can tell you that all this stuff coming out of the White House and Richard Pearl and Doug Feith and Rumsfeld and Cheney and Bush himself, everything they're telling you is either unsubstantiated, fabricated, or exaggerated. And then I wrote a song about it. It was also from the Music Man. And it riled people up. Of course, well, why don't I just let the song speak for itself? Listen to this.
Either you're closing your eyes to a situation you do not wish to acknowledge, or you're a pink panty-wearing commie liberal who is supportive of a terrorist regime in the international community. Well, you got trouble, my friend. Right here I say trouble in the world community. Why, sure, I'm a peace lover, right? Mighty proud to say it, always mighty proud to say it. I consider that the time that I spend talking about peace is golden. Helps me cultivate a sweet nature and a compassionate conservatism and a few votes. Ever try to send a fleet of ships halfway around the earth and keep the tensions going? But just as I say it takes judgment, brains, and maturity to bully the whole damn world, I say that any boob like Clinton can lob a missile into an aspirin factory, and I call that appeasement. The first big step on the road to the depths of democratic hand-wringing. First, it's a little wine from the liberals, then it's drinking beer with Saddam, and the next thing you know, you got Al-Qaeda running around in a Muslim scarf, killing us all with weapons of destruction. Don't forget about 9/11. They don't use good old cluster bombs, no, but a type of weapon of a different sort. Like to see some wild-eyed raghead screaming, Allah Akbar, makes your blood boil, well, I should say. Now, friends, let me tell you what I mean. You got 1, 2, 3, I don't know how many resolutions at Security Council. Those resolutions mark the difference between rogue nations and the free. Listen to me. As you will see, they've got WMD. For the past 12 years, the United Nations has been frittering. All the naysayers frittering. Frittering away with resolutions and inspections, too. Listening to the Frenchies gab and the Fritzies gab. Never mind getting aluminum tubes and nuclear bomb stuff. Never mind Jose Padilla and his dirty bomb, till we're all incinerated in a mushroom cloud, and that's trouble. Oh, yes, you got trouble. I'm thinking about Al-Qaeda guys in northern Iraq boiling up gas and praying to Allah. You got trouble, my friend, in the international community. There's a Q in Al-Qaeda and a Q in Iraq. That's my cue to attack. All you folks are peace-loving citizens, but I'm going to be perfectly frank. Do you know what kind of stuff they got bubbling in test tubes by those Euphrates banks? I'm talking about anthrax. I'm talking about VX, bubbling up sarin gas like terrorist fiends, and bragging all about how they're going to kick the butt of the mother of all Satans one fine night. They take the drones from the hangar and fly them to America. Suicide bombers, evildoers, and Armageddon! Grab your son, your daughter from the slaughter of the terrorist hordes. Mass hysteria! Friends, it's a new country since 9/11. Oh, you got trouble. And it's a pity. There's a Q in Al-Qaeda and a Q in Iraq. That's a cue to attack. Oh, you got trouble. And it ain't pretty. Gotta figure out a way to get those oil fields from Iraq. Our children's children gonna have trouble. Oh, you're in trouble. I forgot to mention he gassed his people. He gassed his people too. Oh, yes, you got trouble. You gotta turn Baghdad to rubble. And Mohammed Atta, he met with the Iraqis too. Oh, you got trouble. You got terrible, terrible trouble. We gotta find a way to turn Baghdad into a molten bubble. Oh, you got trouble. Oh, yes, you got trouble right here in the international community with a Q in Al-Qaeda and a Q in Iraq. That's our cue to attack!
That was 20 years ago, leading us into a war that left almost 5,000 American soldiers dead and 100,000 Iraqis at least, as well as as well as what it cost, which was almost $1 trillion over the years. And for what? The American public is easily manipulated when they feel enemy. Times have changed, whether it's an attack by Al-Qaeda, whether it's a COVID epidemic, or whether it's the citizens of River City in 1912 who are looking at cars replacing horses, and an America that is about to step on the world stage as a major military power. Why, you can even sell them a boys' band. Thank you so much for watching, and hope you subscribe, recommend us to friends, and share it on Facebook. Thanks again for watching. All my best.